This is how Dave Ramsey saved my wedding business. Okay, story time. So, in 2015, I was a budding entrepreneur. The summer of 2015 was my second wedding season as a wedding photographer. And at this point, I was doing it full time. I didn't have a part-time job anymore. So everything, all of my time was going into this business. And at the time, I was talking with my sister and she was listening to this crazy guy on the internet called Dave Ramsey. And he was yelling at people about their financial decisions. Now, I had remember hearing him on the radio at some point throughout my life. I knew a little bit about him, but I didn't really knew what he was or what he did. I just knew that I didn't want to be yelled at about my own financial decisions. But I decided to look him up. I think I looked him up on YouTube and I listened to one of the episodes and then another one and then another one. And then all of a sudden I was hooked. And it was around the same time, July 2015, that I got a huge photography job. It was the biggest single paycheck, biggest job that I had gotten up to that point, and it was for $5,000. It was incredible. I was very excited. And I so vividly remember getting the check in the mail. And I remember opening it at my desk and I just looked at it and I was like, wow, $5,000. This is great. I can do so much with this. Like all of the things that I'm going to buy. Will I buy a new camera, a new lens? Like, what am I going to do? But then all of a sudden, this little kind of worm was in my brain, this nagging feeling. I had been listening to all this Dave Ramsey stuff, and I was like, oh no. Do I have to pay off my debt with this check? No. And honestly, it took me a few days. I set the check down on my desk. And I just thought about it. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Do I put it in the bank? Do I pay off my school loans? What? Oh no, what do I do? And it honestly, it made me feel a little sick to my stomach because I knew that I'm a very all in person, right? If I go into something, I'm going to go full tilt into it. And so I knew if I was going to start paying off debt now, off my school loans now, that it was going to be a nonstop thing until I was done and complete with it. So at that point, I had some minimum payments or something for my school loans or parts of them, or I don't exactly remember everything, but I remember looking it up and it was $87.64 I was paying every month. And if I continued paying $87.64 towards my debt and I didn't do anything else, it was going to take me 47 and a half years to pay off. And that's not any more interest. That's just what it was at that time. And when I thought about it that way, that made me feel sick. I was like, 50 years? I'm going to be dead by the time I pay off this school loan. And that made me feel so stressed knowing that I had this, these payments and this debt hovering over me. It was also around this exact same time that, I don't know if you saw my last video, it was my first vlog, and I talked about wanting to make $50,000. I remember at the same time, maybe a little bit before this, I was like, I want to make $50,000 as a wedding photographer. And if I could do that, it would be incredible. So I looked at all of my debt. Most of it, 95%, was school loans. And then I had a small debt to the IRS, which, if you've seen my tax video, you'll know why. My first tax video, you'll know why. But all of that came to $50,000. And I remember thinking I want to make $50,000 a year, but my debt is $50,000. So if I was to make $50,000 and put every penny of that to my debt, I would have $0 left over. And that was a very depressing feeling because here I was thinking like, if my dream would be to make $50,000, but I owe someone that much money. So that was the beginning of the motivation to be like, this is annoying me. Like, I'm kind of angry at my debt. Like, this is frustrating. I want to get this out of my life so that when I get money, when I make money from a photo shoot, it can go to me and not to someone else. And so I went back to my desk and I took out that check and I was like, all right, $5,000. This is the beginning. I'm going to start this thing and I'm going to pay off every single penny of my debt. And I can just vividly remember taking it to the bank and then transferring it to pay off part of my school loan. And that was very painful because I had worked so hard. I had been building my business as best as I could. And I got this huge job and it all went away. So for the next 2 years, averaging about $2,000 a month. Sometimes I did less than that. Sometimes I did more than that. But every month I was constantly putting any money that I had towards paying off this debt. And my friends were going out to eat. My friends were going on vacation. They were buying stuff. They were buying a new car. They were buying all this stuff. And I stayed at home and worked. I did nothing. Definitely didn't go on. Maybe went out to eat a couple times. But for the most part, I was determined to get this finished. And I did everything that I could to make it happen as fast as I could. So then on July 24th, 2017, so 2 years, 15, 16, 17, 2 years after I started with that $5,000 check, I paid off the last dollars of my debt. And I wanted to be a little dramatic with it. So I actually saved up a few months and my last check was $10,000, a $10,000 check, and it cleared it. And I remember just getting a letter in the mail saying like, your debt has been paid. And even thinking about it now, makes me feel a little emotional. Because, even though I was pretty young still, I was in my 20s, I felt like an adult. I felt like I put my mind towards a goal and doing something. And not only did I actually begin to make $50,000 within that time for my wedding business, I had paid off this seemingly huge amount of debt that it didn't even feel like it was possible. I didn't seem like I could do that. But because I had a goal, because I was fixated on okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make $50,000 a year and I'm going to pay off $50,000 in 2 years. I felt incredibly empowered. I felt like I could do anything and I felt free. I felt like this burden was lifted off me. And that changed my wedding business. It saved my wedding business multiple times over the last decade of being a wedding photographer. Except for that first year or so of starting my wedding business, I had a part-time job. I've been a full-time wedding photographer. I've just taken photos to make money for the last 10 years. And one huge aspect of making that possible was because I haven't had debt over that time. And so when there were months that I didn't have that much money, it was okay because I kept my expenses low and I didn't have to pay anyone anything. When I made money, it went to me. So I didn't feel desperate to book clients that I knew that were not going to be a good fit. I tried to really intentionally build my business, knowing that I was on a very financially secure place. And so if that was the end of the story, I think that would be pretty cool. And I would be thankful to Dave Ramsey for doing his baby steps so I got out of debt. But that wasn't even the biggest part of the story. The biggest part came in a year of 2020. And being a wedding photographer in Toronto, which was one of the most locked down cities in the world, it was not a good time to be a wedding photographer. And I knew so many photographers that were in a serious crunch because all of a sudden money wasn't coming in like it was used to. We had to stay at home. People didn't need photographers. And it was extremely stressful and extremely scary for a lot of people. Except for us, it wasn't like it wasn't that big of a deal. During the height of 2020, we had no new wedding income for 5 months. Yes, that's correct. 5 months, almost a half of a year, we had no new wedding income. And instead of being super panicked and being like, oh no, I need to change careers, we need to do all this stuff, we kept calm because we had low expenses, we didn't have any debt, and we had money saved. So we were okay. And so instead of being panicked and making rash decisions, I actually started looking towards the future. I looked towards like, okay, I can't do wedding photography right now, but surely we're going to get back to it eventually. And in the meantime, what else can I do? And so that's when I started this YouTube channel. And I did a podcast for a year. I worked on other things on my business that didn't necessarily make me money at the time, but would work towards, creating a more robust business in the future. And kind of like 2015, in 2020, I believe it was March, I had the biggest single job that I have ever had in my career. And it was just a few days before everything got locked down. And that single job helped us so much in the coming months when we didn't have any new wedding income. One, because all we had to do was pay for our living expenses, nothing else. But also one of the most important things was that we had an emergency fund. Just like Dave Ramsey, tells you, is to have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. We leaned on the 6-month emergency fund because, being a business owner, especially a wedding photographer, sometimes you have great months, sometimes you have low months. And so we wanted to have a good cash buffer. Like, I can't believe how well that time went. It could have been so different. It could have been to the point where I had to completely change what I was doing, close the wedding business and do something that was sustainable. But because years before I had gotten out of debt, I had made a financial plan, I had focused on being financially stable, like that saved my wedding business. And even though it wasn't the year financially that we expected, we stayed above water, and it wasn't of course it was a little stressful, but we had the money to pay for all the things that we needed. And a huge part of that was the fact that we didn't have debt. And honestly, when I look back at the last 10 years of being a wedding photographer, being a small business owner, I think that's one of the big factors of how I've made it so long, is because I've stayed away from debt. I've stayed away from consumer debt for my cameras and computers or whatever. I only ever purchased what I could afford. Like if I needed a new computer and it was kind of slow, but I didn't have the cash for it, I had to wait. I had to book more weddings. I had to grow my business. I had to grow my business at the speed of cash and not saddle myself down with debt. We've always had a healthy emergency fund around 6 months, which is really difficult to do. And it feels painful. And it feels like, like we're putting all this money for an emergency fund, but we could do so much more with it. It's painful and it's hard, but it has been the difference. And I see the benefits of it now. It was difficult to do it originally, but now I'm so thankful and I'm reaping all the benefits of that hard work. I'm reaping the benefits of taking that $5,000 check and starting the process to pay off all my debt. Because it's not just a 2020 that could screw you over. It's a client that doesn't pay. It's a slow season. It's getting your gear destroyed and your insurance doesn't cover it. It's things like that could completely take you out as a business. And being out of debt and having an emergency fund, and in my case, following the Dave Ramsey baby steps, has quite literally saved my wedding business.